What's up, guys? It's May 6, 2018. My name is Ben Thompson, and we're about to do episode 3 of the Badass Podcast. So, yeah, fuck it. How's it going, everybody? I am back with another episode of the Badass Podcast. My name is Ben Thompson, and we're going to do something a little different this week. Usually in the last, or for the first two, I can't say usually yet when it's only your third episode, I guess. But for the last couple weeks, I've done interviews with people, and this time I wanted to do something a little different, kind of trying some different things. I want to see what works, what doesn't, what people like, what people hate. So for this week, what I'm going to do is I went out on Facebook and Patreon yesterday, and I put out just saying that, like, if you had any questions, any of the fans, any of the readers, any of you guys out there wanted to ask me, I'll get on here today and I'll answer them, and then I'll post it tomorrow, and you guys will be listening to it in the future, in Monday. Okay, yeah, I feel like I could have said that better, but we're going to do this. Here we go. I am going to answer the Patreon people first because they give me money every month, and that's super awesome and helpful. I know that this is super off tangent or super off topic here, but when I started doing the website, I was getting lots of hits on the website, especially at the height of it in like maybe 2010 to 12, like that kind of time period, and I was making all my money off of Google ads, which was pretty cool, and it used to work out to being like, if you got like 1 million hits, it would work out to like $1,000 in Google ads, at least for me. I don't know about for everybody else. I don't get as many hits as I used to, but also Google ads doesn't pay out as well as it used to because a lot of people are doing ad blockers, all this other stuff. So anyway, Patreon is one of these cool things where you can donate to people that you like, and you give them like $2 a month or whatever, just to support them doing their thing. And if it wasn't for those guys, that's basically my primary source of income from the website these days, which is cool and it's awesome. And I follow a bunch of people. I donate to people on Patreon all the time, and they always do all of these really cool early access things and things you only get on Patreon. And I'm not good about doing that kind of stuff. I'm not good at, doing the early access stuff. I kind of just procrastinate until the last possible minute and create something really fast and then throw it out there. And so I don't do a lot for the Patreon guys, so I will answer their questions first, and that will be what your $2 gets you this month, I suppose. Okay. First question on here is the Blue-Eyed Bard. He says, what are, say, 3 to 10 attributes that are consistently present in most badasses throughout history? Now, this is a question I get pretty often when I'm talking about, when I do book readings or school talks and stuff like that. People are always kind of like, what constitutes a badass? What makes a person badass as opposed to not? And it's interesting because I had done the website for a really long time. I started the website in 2004, and it was, I think, in 2008 when I was writing the first badass book. And one of the things that I kind of had written all 40 chapters of it. I'd submitted it, everything had kind of been edited. And my editor went to me and he was like, we need to do a chapter here that kind of defines what a badass is. Before we start getting into talking about all of them, we need to set ground rules for what makes somebody badass and why certain people maybe wouldn't make the list. What's the one thing that groups all of these people together? And it's something that super fucked me up because I didn't have an answer. I didn't really know. It's pretty obvious if somebody does a bunch of badass shit that they're badass, but you can't really say that in an intro. So I had to really sit down and I had to think about, what do Genghis Khan and Joan of Arc have in common, right? Horatio Nelson is defending England from invasion by Napoleon. Leonidas is defending his homeland. Vlad the Impaler is he's also defending his homeland, I suppose, but he's doing it in a slightly more violent way by sticking a bunch of people on spikes and putting them up outside of his castle. What makes somebody, they're heroes, they're villains, they're all over the map. They can be regular people, they can be exceptional human beings that have world leaders and things. And what connects these people? And for me, I think that the only true determinant is determination, is the perseverance, is the ability to not stop when in the face of ultimate adversity, right? This is what I want to do. I want to be a sadistic, murdering asshole. I want to save my people from occupation by the enemy. I want to capture this bunker. I want to do whatever, right? It doesn't matter what it is that you want to do. you can be badass by going all out 100%, fighting through every wall that's put in your way and not backing down, not giving up until you've accomplished your mission, however admirable or like nefarious it may be. I think that's kind of my answer to that. That's the answer I usually like to give to it, and I think it's pretty solid. It gets to be kind of a tricky situation because it puts a lot of people into the groups of, you could make arguments for them being badasses because they fulfill this criteria, and yeah, I'm sure you can make arguments for some pretty horrible people as being badasses if you just use determination as a factor. I'm not going to write those stories, but it also allows you to be a little bit more broad in your contextualization of it, right? You can say that somebody who was very nonviolent, being badass doesn't always have to involve killing people or crippling people or horrifically maiming, mutilation, destruction, mayhem. It can be something that you can do in your daily life, right? Like, I feel like this could be my motivational speech career, when you just be like, you can be badass every day, just don't back down and follow your dreams and push it to the limit or whatever. So I don't know. I was going somewhere with this, but I totally lost it. So I don't even think there's 3 to 10 determinants between the different badasses. I typically tend to gravitate towards, personally, the stories that are from history of people who were massively obscure. The example I always like to give is the chapter on Wolf the Quarrelsome in the first Badass book. I have him on the website as well. So Wolf the Quarrelsome was this Irish warrior from, I want to say, like the 700s, 800s AD. And the Vikings it's 1014. The Vikings had come to Ireland, and the Vikings were kind of stomping ass all around Ireland. They had captured a bunch of cities. The Vikings are badass to begin with, but the Vikings also had the advantage of having access to steel, which is something that they didn't really have that much of in Ireland. Irish soldiers were using primarily wooden weapons and leather armor, and then the Vikings had access to steel armor and weapons, and it makes a pretty big difference in combat. By 1014, the Irish were at a place where they could finally start trying to throw the Vikings out, and this very big battle happened called Clontarf, and it's in 1014 AD, and the Irish get they unite under a high king. All of the different Irish clans and counties, they team up under Brian Boru, who was this great king of the High King of Ireland, and they go to fight the Vikings. And in the Viking stories and in the Irish stories, they talk about this guy named Wolf the Quarrelsome, and he's listed as Brian Boru's brother, but that doesn't necessarily, when you're reading histories and stuff, mean that he was a birth brother. I don't know. We don't know. And he leads the armies of the Irish against the Vikings, and he defeats them. And the Vikings are fleeing, and as they're fleeing, they flee into the camp of Brian Boru, and they kill him. And Wolf the Quarrelsome hears about this, and he gets so mad that he hunts down the Viking raiding party that was responsible for it, the guys that did this. He catches them before they leave Ireland, and according to the stories, he kills all of them. And then Brodir of Man was the main Viking leader of this group, and so he cuts Brodir across the abdomen with an axe, and then pulls out his intestines, ties his intestines to a tree, and then makes Brodir walk around the tree until he dies. And that's it. We don't know anything about Wolf before that. We don't know anything about Wolf after that. We don't know anything other than that his name is Wolf the Quarrelsome. We don't have a last name. There's nothing. We don't have a clan. We don't have anything. There's 2 pieces of information on him. One is in Irish and one is in Viking. So stands to reason that he was probably a real dude. And these are the stories I love. This is the reason we love guys like Snake Eyes and Boba Fett, and, well, maybe not Boba Fett now that they've gotten into the backstory. That's why I don't like all of these prequels and backstories and things, because I love these guys that just appear out of nowhere. They do some seriously hardcore fucked up shit, and then they disappear forever, right? Anne Bonny vanishes out of history after she escapes from prison by saying that she was pregnant, which she may or may not have been, right? And I love those kind of stories. I love these people who may not have had a humongous impact on history, right? Wolf won this battle, but the Vikings being thrown out of Ireland is Brian Boru's story. It's not his story necessarily. But it's one of those things that he'll get 1 or 2 lines in a history book, and when you're reading it, you're like, fuck, I want to know more about that guy. What was that guy's deal? And so that was kind of why I started the website to begin with, was just wanting to tell these stories and just, all these cool things that went on behind the scenes, and all these lesser known characters from history, and even the bigger known characters from history. There's all these cool stories that go along with them that don't necessarily impact their lives, right? The story that I like to tell with that is the Julius Caesar one, right? Julius Caesar, of course, he, overthrew the Republic, and he conquered the Gauls, and the stuff with Cleopatra. There's a lot of good Caesar stories, but my favorite one is the one when he was younger. He was like a teenager, I think, and he was on a ship in the Mediterranean that got captured by pirates. And the pirates, they were going to ransom him back to his folks or whatever. But the way the pirates work, like, he wasn't going to escape. They kind of had a guy keeping an eye on him and stuff, but he was hanging out with them, and they were all sitting around drinking one night, and Julius Caesar goes to them, and he's like, yeah, I'm having a really good time. You guys seem pretty cool. I'm really sorry that I'm going to have you all killed after I get out of here. And they all laugh because they think he's joking. And then after he gets out of there, he has them all hunted down and crucified along the Appian Way. And that's a cool story. That's some badass shit, right? Like, I like those kinds of stories, and those are the ones that aren't going to make it into a real textbook because they're just not, they're not super relevant, right? I did the Guts and Glory book on the Vikings, and it was one of those things where the Vikings are super cool, and everybody thinks they're super cool, and they contributed a lot of really amazing things to human history, but there's not a lot of people that can name a Viking that's not Leif Erikson, right? You got Eric the Red, you got Leif Erikson, and who's the most famous Viking? Who's the most badass Viking of all time? I wanted to write that book because there's a bunch of cool shit there that we don't know. I don't know. I'm going off the rails here with this question, but yes. So 3 to 10 things. I gave one, and then I went off on about 150 other topics. So I'm going to move on to the next question. Patreon person. This is Eric Slater. He is my co-author for my Epic Fails books that are coming out soon. Eric runs a website called epicfails.com. We're going to do a book together. We're doing 4 books together. The first 2 come out in July, and I think we're going to be doing a little bit of traveling for that. We might go to Florida and Vegas, Seattle. We're going to do a reading, maybe a couple other places. I don't know yet. I'll have more details on that. I'll have him on the show at some point. But he posts on here, and he says, what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? So my Google does know the answer to this question, so I'm going to pimp it here. Hey Google, what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow?
African or European?
That's the correct answer to that question. Okay, let's go on to the Facebook questions, because I only have 2 people that responded to me on Patreon. Is it weird that I'm like nervous doing this? It feels super weird to be sitting alone in my apartment feeling anxiety while I'm just talking into a microphone. It's very bizarre. It's a very bizarre feeling. Anyway, we're going to move on here. Andrew Block writes, and he says, what made you decide to start writing Badass of the Week? So this kind of ties into what I was just talking about, but I used to have this day job working in a university department in Boston that didn't have summer classes, but you always had to have somebody sitting in the office to answer questions in case any students or anybody else came by and had a question or whatever. So it would be basically just me sitting alone on the 4th floor of this, like, I guess it was at some point a church or a chapel or something. So it's all picture like very old stone building, like creepy stained glass windows everywhere, and I'm sitting alone. There's the whole hallway is like totally dark except for one open door with a little bit of light spilling out of it, and that's my office. Just anybody that had to come visit me, I feel really bad for them, because it must have been terrifying walking down this like echoey dark hallway trying to find my office so that I could answer your questions about whether or not you should register to speak ancient Greek or not. And I was basically just sitting in this desk by myself waiting for a phone call or waiting for somebody to come by. And occasionally some of the professors would come in and they would need help, or my boss would come in and need help, and so I couldn't just bail. I couldn't work from home. I had to be there. And so a lot of my day job involved me sitting alone in an office, and I would read a lot of websites. At the time, I was really super into, I really loved reading Maddox, and I loved reading Something Awful. I always thought that Zach Parsons was an amazing writer for them, and I loved his style. And And then I would read Project Gutenberg stuff free online. We're looking at 2003, so it was some of the only stuff you could read online. There was no Kindle or anything like that going on back then. There was no Facebook back then, and I would, just read these articles. I read all of like the Edgar Rice Burroughs stuff, the Tarzan stuff, the John Carter's, those kind of things. I would bring books with me sometimes to read, and I guess Something Awful did a thing where you could write in. They were going to have like guest writers or something. Like if you write in something, and there was a week that they were going to do 5 guest authors, and so I submitted something, and they didn't take it. So it was all 5 days. I was waiting every day to see if they would post my story I wrote. I don't remember what it was about, and yeah, they didn't take it. And then I was just like, well, fuck it, I'll just do it. I'll just do my own, right? I'll do my own website. So I started this website, and this is actually before. This is September of 2003, and I started a website, and it was just, I would just write silly things. I would just write whatever the hell was in my head. It was kind of almost more of like a Something Awful style website where, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I would put up like just a silly, you know, how to conduct a paranormal investigation, or like funny things about how to be like a wine connoisseur, or little things like that. I made like a JavaScript RPG generator one time, and I would post these things Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then I decided on Fridays I was going to start posting, instead of the articles I was doing before, I was going to do this badass of the week, right? I loved history. I worked in like a history department. These are stories. I majored in history in college. I've always been super into history. I've always loved historical stories. My dad used to collect a lot of memorabilia and stuff, so we had hanging up in the walls of my living room when I was growing up was an old Confederate cavalry saber and an old British cavalry saber. There was a Zulu spear, a Spartan longsword, there were flintlock, percussion cap muskets, there were a bunch of really cool old weapons, and I used to love looking at them. And my dad was really cool. He would always take them down off the wall and be like, oh, here's this blade is curved because it's easier to slash through armor when you're slashing down from horseback. It just, all these really cool, amazing stories, and it just made these old history stories real for me. I never had that problem of hating history. I always loved it. They were never just a bunch of old dead white guys, which is what a lot of history is when it's taught. And for me, it was real things. These are real things that I can touch and I can hold and I can see the story. And there's a picture of George Washington on the wall of our house, and my dad would tell some really cool stories about the American Revolution, and I'd just be like, this person's our first president, and you should pay attention to him because he's important. He was born in this year. He died in this year. Everything was always exciting. It was always like an action movie for me. And I wanted to do that with these historical figures. So I used to just joke around and call it Julius Caesar over beers, because I would just write these historical stories in real, regular, everyday words. So that's what I did, and I would start posting those on Friday, and I'd still write my little bullshit articles, whatever, on Monday and Wednesday, and then on Friday I would post the badass of the week. And, I was getting like 5 hits a week. It was me twice to like make sure the website was up and running, and then it was like my 3 friends who were just trying to humor me. And yeah, I remember the first time I got an email from somebody I'd never met before. I was super tripping out. I printed it up and like I taped it up to like my or I pinned it to the corkboard over top of my desk, and then I had a file. It became a file of people who they send me emails that I would keep. And now, and it became crazy, right? I was getting 10 hits, 100 hits, 1,000 hits, and within, I'll say, 3 years of that, just doing it every week and responding to my emails and posting new content, I wasn't even updating the other 2, the weekly articles. They weren't that good. I mean, they're kind of embarrassing for me to go back and read them now anyway. But the badass people loved. And if you go back and read some of the old badasses on the site, they're not that good. But people were loving it and people liked it, and I was getting more and more hits. And I decided that instead of the weekly articles were a lot harder to write because they took a lot more. I had to think of something new to write about every week. But the badasses, like, I'll just find a cool new historical figure and I'll talk about them. So I switched over. I registered badassoftheweek.com, and I've been doing it every week since, if you don't count the last like year. Though that is that is coming back. I've got a partnership with a website called We Are the Mighty. They are a veterans blog primarily, but they are also a military history blog, and they're going to add Badass as a column on their site, and then I'll cross post it with Badass of the Week, and so we'll keep it going again. But yeah, I just remember getting 100 hits, 1,000, and then it became 1,000,000, and then it was 2 to 3 million hits a month, and it was pretty amazing. And then I'll never forget, like, the first time I saw somebody doing my style online. I remember tripping out on it. I read there was some website that had somebody had posted a thing about different badass characters from history, and they had included all characters that had come from my website. I don't own the stories on these people, so I can't say that they stole my stories, but they were doing characters that I had written about before, and they were doing it in a style that was very similar to mine. And somebody had sent it to me. It was like, these guys are ripping you off, and I just remember thinking, like, this is pretty fucking cool, actually. So I don't know. I love doing it. I'm excited to get back into doing the weekly articles, and God, I'm just not good at, like, keeping focus on answering these questions, am I? Okay, I'm gonna move ahead rather than give you my fucking autobiography. Okay, second one is maybe I shouldn't say people's names, huh? I don't know if it's cool to hear your name on here, or if it's, like, not cool to read people's last names from their Facebook pages on my podcast. I am going to go with first names only. Okay, so Gerard says, what martial arts do you practice? And I do not currently practice any martial arts, but I did teach American Kempo was what I studied mostly. I did that for, say, 6 to 8 years. I did the Parker system. I did the Tracy system, and then I later switched to a different school that taught the Parker system. And I taught women's defense classes. I taught kids classes, teenagers, that kind of stuff. I used to do these weekend seminars. I was pretty good. I used to have almost a full horizontal split, which is pretty painful to think about now that I'm 38 and I'm not as flexible as I used to be. But yeah, I used to do martial arts demonstrations. I had a staff demonstration, bow staff, because I was super into Donatello, of course. And I had a sword demonstration. I had a staff demonstration. I was second in the state in sparring in my martial art in I don't even remember the year, but it was the 90s. So I got pretty good into it. I won state with my weapons form because I took a pool cue that my dad used to run a pool hall, and I took a really nice pool cue, and I did it as a bow staff, and then halfway through I unscrewed it into 2 sticks, and then I did the second half as the 2 sticks. So that was pretty cool. I started doing I did Wing Chun a little bit after that, and yeah, that's it. I haven't done martial arts in a long time. I would probably cower if somebody tried to punch me now, but I don't know. Hopefully not. Next question. Ruben says, what can you tell us about the bear that went to war? All right, I talked about him a little bit with Brian when I did the first episode of the podcast, because Brian Snowdy drew that picture for the first Badass book. But Wojtek the Soldier Bear, Voytek, you can also see it spelled sometimes as Wojtek, which is, Wojtek is how it's pronounced, and Wojtek is how it's spelled in the original Polish, but still pronounced Wojtek because Polish is an infuriating language to try and read. Wojtek was a bear. As best I can remember the story, Wojtek was a Syrian brown bear cub that the Polish artillery. So when Poland got overrun by the Nazis in 1939, at the very beginning of World War I, there were some people that were able to escape. Some Polish soldiers were able to get out of there and link up with the Allies. They were withdrawn. They ended up linking up with the British primarily, and they were reincorporated into the Allied military, and they were used most extensively in Italy. And what happened with, there was a group of the Polish artillery, I want to say it's the Second Corps. They ended up in Syria being relocated down towards the British base in Egypt. And as they were passing through British Palestine, they a group of people found this little boy that had this bear, and they traded something for this little bear, and it was, teddy bear size when they got it. But by the time it had grown up, it was human size. But this bear had been naturalized around humans its entire life. So you could see it, like, there's stories of it sitting in the passenger seat with its arm out the window, like while they're driving the trucks down the road. The guys used to wrestle with it, and they said the bear would like to drink beer or smoke cigarettes or eat cigarettes or whatever. It seems like something you probably would get in trouble with if you put it into a movie today, but this really happened, and this is how people were, so whatever. And yeah, they trained the bear eventually to carry artillery shells to the front lines of the battle. So he would come back to the truck, and they'd hand him like an artillery shell, and he'd walk it up to the guns. And the Polish artillery was very instrumental in the capture of Monte Cassino in Italy from the Germans. It was a super, super bloody battle during the Italian campaign, I want to say 43. And yeah, it was there. There was a bear on the front lines. And after the war, a lot of the Poles retired. They didn't want to go back to, if you'd been fighting with the English, you didn't want to go back to Soviet-occupied Poland. So there was a program in England to resettle the Polish soldiers, Polish veterans in Great Britain. And so they did, and you can't just really have this bear running around, so they put him in the zoo. They put him in the Edinburgh Zoo, I believe. And a lot of his old comrades would come visit him while he was in the zoo, and sometimes they would even jump over the fence and jump into the bear enclosure and wrestle around with him for old time's sake. They would always get in trouble for this, but it didn't stop them from doing it. It's such a cool story. It's one of the best, the most popular articles on my website. That one and Nikola Tesla, and it's only because Matt Inman, the Oatmeal, linked into the Tesla article, and that kind of blew my shit up pretty hardcore. But yeah, Wojtek, it's a crazy story. It's totally true. You can see pictures of him. The bear is now appears on the insignia of the Polish 2nd Artillery Corps. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, it's a totally true story. Who's next here? We've got Patrick. He says, what's the most badass injury sustained in combat that didn't keep the injured from being badass? The first thing that's coming... I haven't read any of these questions before just now, so I'm just trying to go off the top of my head. I wanted to be surprised. I wanted you to get a genuine response from me. I don't know how well thought out that was, because there are stories that I would have liked to have had the details a little bit more solidified if I was going to be retelling them. That bear story was completely off the top of my head, and I'm pretty sure it's correct. It's 100%, but... Okay, so my favorite story with this, I don't know where I was going with that. Okay, my favorite story with this is Baba Deep Singh, right? He is a saint of the Sikh religion, and you could take this with a grain of salt, I suppose. But according to the stories, Baba Deep Singh was the Mughals had come into India, and they had conquered India, and they kind of fucked up everybody that was down there. And the Mughals were Muslim, primarily from like the Pakistan and Afghanistan region, and they had come in, they conquered India, they installed themselves as the new dynasty. They ruled India for a couple hundred years, I believe, and there was one part where the Sikhs had to retake the Sikh holiest place in the Sikh religion is this giant golden city, and it's a big golden temple, and it's the holiest place. It's the Church of the Holy Sepulchre of Sikhism. And they're going to take it, and the commander of the Sikh forces is this guy, Baba Deep Singh, and he is revered now as a saint of the Sikh religion. And I got so many death threats from Sikh people when I wrote that article about Baba Deep Singh, because the Sikhs consider it very disrespectful to use harsh language when you are talking about their saints, which I get, right? I always try to stay away from talking about religious figures if I can help it. I can make a really solid argument for a Jesus Christ article or a Muhammad article or a lot of these major characters from world religions, but I don't really want to make religious statements. I don't really want to get into this. I don't want to cause trouble for anybody. I don't want to inadvertently piss people off or offend them when I'm trying to write something nice about their faith, whatever. Okay, so I didn't realize that Baba Deep Singh was such a huge saint in their religion, and that is an oversight on my behalf that I went through and I corrected all of the foul language, and I didn't, I was like, I was saying stuff, I was like, this motherfucker didn't slow down, and they're like, you just called our saint a motherfucker, and I was like, that's not how I meant that, but it's being interpreted that way enough that I should probably chill on that. So I did go back and edit that article to make it a little bit less offensive to a major world religion, I suppose. But yeah, a lot of people were mad at me when I wrote that article and kept threatening me with death. The only death threats I've ever received are from Sikh people. Isn't that weird? I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to tempt fate and talk about him anyway. Okay, so Baba Deep Singh was the commander of the Sikh faith, the Sikh army, and they go to retake the Golden Temple from the Mughals. And during the course of... My Google is like losing its shit because every time I say Mughal, it thinks I'm talking to it, so it's just flashing and like losing its mind at me. If it says the unladen swallow thing again, I apologize. Okay, so he goes to retake. There's this huge battle and they're fighting, and he cuts his way through to according to the story, the Mughals have like desecrated the temple by putting cow parts into the holy fountains and all of this. It's this horrific. It sounds. The way that you read it, it sounds like a Diablo 3 level, and Baba Deep Singh is fighting his way through here, and he finds the leader of the Mughals, and the Mughal leader strikes him through the neck with the sword, and it cuts his head off. But Baba Deep Singh catches his head and kills his enemy, and keeps fighting while he's holding his own severed head, and then when the battle's over, he finally dies. He's so holy, the spirit of the gods, or whatever, gets into him, and he wins this battle and becomes a saint of his religion, fighting after his head is cut off. Baba Deep Singh, you can look him up. There's lots of paintings and pictures and all of these things of it. That's my answer. I'm going to go with that. The dude that won the battle and liberated the most holy place in his religion while decapitated. Okay, Grant says cake or death. My answer, of course, is cake. Ezra says, do you own a Thompson submachine gun? Did you own a Thompson submachine gun as a kid? Or have you ever fired a real one as an adult? Maybe got yourself a vague personal connection with this iconic gun due to sharing its name? So yes, I have shot a Thompson submachine gun in real life. I went to Vegas a couple of years back for the American Librarian Association's annual convention. I did some book talks for the Guts and Glory series that I do. I don't know if I don't really talk about it a ton on the Badass page, but I have these Guts and Glory books, and they're generally designed for, I call them Badass Junior because they're badass without as many of the dick jokes, and they're primarily designed to be something like, you could subscribe it. You could assign it as supplemental reading at a school and not get, torn to shreds by the PTA. So I did a talk at the American Librarian Association annual convention, and it was in Vegas. And I was there, and I was like, there's two things. They're expensive. They take a whole day, and I could only really afford to do one of them. And it was like you could go drive race cars on the racetrack and go drive like my dream car is I would love to have driven like a Lamborghini Countach around like a racetrack. My other dream car, by the way, is I own a IROC. I own a Z28 Camaro. It's like the IROC body style. I love it. It's like my favorite. It's whatever. Okay, we don't have to talk about this. But I didn't do the race car experience. I did the shoot a fully automatic machine gun experience, and it was fucking awesome. They come, they pick you up. I don't remember what the name of the place was, but they come, they pick you up from your hotel. They drive you out there. I got to shoot an AK-47 full auto. I got to shoot an Uzi 9mm. I got to shoot a Thompson submachine gun, and I got to shoot a UMP. What else was there? An M4, and shit. There was another one I forgot though. Yeah, I forgot what the other one was. But it was awesome. It was so fun. And the weird thing with the Tommy gun was that the buttstock of it is angled in a way that it rests. So it's angled 45 degrees. I don't really know how to describe this, but it's inclined from bottom to top. Like the bottom part is bigger than the top part is when you're holding it. So it looks like kind of like a doorstop when it's under your arm. And the problem with that is that it slips out from under your arm. So the recoil ends up, so it feels really nice when you have it up against your shoulder, but the recoil when it kicks up, because it's a 45, right? When it kicks up, it drives the wedge down into under out of your armpit, and it's easy to kind of lose that connection, and the barrel ends up pointing almost at the ceiling, because after a couple of rounds out of it, it kicks out from under your arm, and it's hard to hang on to it. You can't really grip it with your, under your arm. And apparently that was a problem that a lot of soldiers had during the war, and it's one of the reasons they didn't retain the weapon. Anyway, I do not have any personal connection to Colonel John T. Thompson, who is the creator of the Thompson submachine gun, although my father's name is also John Thompson, so that's a weird connection, right? He's not related. He was a pretty interesting guy. He was a veteran he was a soldier. He worked for the Ordnance Department of the United States military, and he had been part of the crew. He had been a Spanish-American War veteran, I believe, and he served in World War I as a general of ordnance, I believe, and he was part of the team that accepted the 1911 in as the service arm in the year 1911 after they got rid of the 38s. And he also developed and built the Thompson submachine gun. He got it originally, it was designed during World War One, when the U.S. wasn't in World War One at the very beginning. So when it was still just England, France, and Germany fighting it out, Russia, there was a lot of this trench warfare stuff going on, and rifles were great in no man's land, but once you got into a trench and you were fighting basically at point blank range, like close quarters combat kind of stuff, you didn't really want to have a bolt action rifle. People were doing better with knives and shotguns and things. So he got really focused on short range, high output automatic weapons. And what he came up with was the Thompson, and he designed it to use the same round that the 1911 would use, so that you could switch them back and forth, like how some of the cowboys used to carry the Winchester repeaters in the same caliber as their handguns, right? A lot of people would have a 45 long Colt or 44-40. So yeah, no connection, but really interesting. And I did get to shoot it once, and it was fucking amazing. And if you ever go to Vegas, you should shoot a fully automatic machine gun. I'm hesitating on whether or not that's good information or good ideas or good advice to give to you guys, but fuck it, I'm going with it. Okay, Daniel says, what made you pick history as your major? I kind of got into this a little bit when I was talking about my dad, but I always loved it, right? So I have 2 degrees from Florida State University. I have history and I have political science. So I was primarily a political science major. I wanted to work for the CIA. I wanted to be an FBI agent. I wanted to, I wanted to be an analyst for the CIA primarily. My minors are in Russian and Eastern European area studies and Middle Eastern area studies, right? So I was taking Russian, I was taking Arabic, I was taking a lot of political science classes. And if something came up that wasn't part of that career path, I would take a history class because I loved history and I just wanted to I wanted to do it. I just wanted to take these classes because I wanted to learn about it. And by the time it was about to be graduation, they were like, well, you have history as like a third minor right now, but you only need like 12 more credits in it, or you only need basically like 2 or 3 more classes in it to make it a major or get a second degree, basically. So yeah, fuck it. I did that and I loved it. Some history classes are better than others, but when I had those 3 left, I kind of had to take a couple classes I didn't give a shit about, right? Like, I don't care about America and the Great Depression, like that kind of shit. Like, I'm not super into it. But, yeah, there's some cool stories out of there, right? Dillinger, you've got some really cool characters that appear in different time periods. And even if it's a subject or a type of history or whatever that you don't really give a shit about, there's cool stories hidden in there somewhere. You just have to find them. Okay. Justin says, any 2 historicals or styles to square off? Which 2 would you pick to fight to the death? I'm taking Samurai versus Vikings. This is kind of like a For Honor kind of question or Deadliest Warrior kind of question. I always have a hard time with these. I get the questions a lot, like which badass would win in a fight, or who was a better general, Napoleon or Patton or whatever. And it's hard for me because they're very difficult to compare, right? Let's say a pirate versus a Viking, right? The Vikings were fucking hardcore. They were hardcore dudes. They were scary as fuck. I love reading historical. I wrote a book about the fucking Vikings, right? Like, I love that shit. But there's a reason why technology improved, and a pirate has a pistol. He doesn't wear armor. He's got a cutlass. But there's a reason why they stopped wearing armor, because it's not useful against a gun. So the technology grows and changes, and as it does, it changes the way that people are fighting. Napoleon was the perfect person for the time that he was in, and so was Patton, and so was Caesar, and so were all of these other people. Would they have been as effective with different equipment? I don't know. Would the greatest samurai of all time have been as great of a warrior if he was born today? I don't know. I don't know the answer to this question. You can't know. It's impossible, right? Even when you're looking at like the samurai versus the knights, right? That's kind of a good comparison. The samurai were several hundred years later, and their armor was built around different fighting styles. Everything was built around different fighting styles. One of the stories I love about this is they were talking about the von Berdau's death ride. It's the last great cavalry charge, cavalry melee in world history, and it takes place during the Franco-Prussian War, which I want to say is like the late 1860s, 68, 69, somewhere around there. And we're looking at a time period where everybody is using, Civil War style weapons, maybe more advanced. The French are carrying this mitrailleuse, or however the fuck you pronounce that. It's basically a Gatling gun. You've got cannons, you've got artillery, you've got bolt action rifles still, but with magazines in them, and cartridge magazines. And von Berdau is this old, gray-haired Prussian dude with a huge beard, and he is ordered to take the French cannons, and the French cannons are interspersed with these Gatling guns, and it's a suicide mission, but he goes for it, and he finds this weird depression in the ground to where he could approach the French guns and they couldn't see him. And he does that, and he charges in and he attacks the French guns and he takes them. And this is something that was so. This is the reason why World War I, these fucking armies were bringing horses, like cavalry, and charging machine guns with horses. Is because von Berdau was successful attacking machine guns with horses in 1869 or whatever. And yeah, but he gets there, he takes it. And it's this miracle of just being in the right place at the right time, finding this perfect avenue of attack, finding this perfect geographic pattern where he could get in there and ambush the French. And the French counterattack him with their own cavalry. And it's one of these stories that I love because I was reading this article, or I was reading the book written by, there was a British soldier who was with von Berdau at the time. He was a British guy who was in the Prussian military somehow. I think he had like a German dad or something, and he was telling his story about being there, and he is talking about this, and he's like, it's such an interesting thing to watch this cavalry melee happen, because the French have these lighter curved swords, and everybody's still wearing breastplates. They're that cuirassiers, or however you pronounce that. So everybody's wearing armor around the important parts, right? And the French they have these lighter swords, and they are kind of poking and prodding and trying to find the weak points in the armor to exploit the weaknesses of the armor, and precision attacks against the German cavalry. And the Germans have these heavier, bigger swords, and they're just trying to bludgeon down people's defenses. And even then, even at the same time period, with the same equipment, you've got these people who have these different fighting styles. And I always think that's such a cool story. It's not. Now that I've told it, I realize it's not super relevant to the question or to whatever I was trying to say with my point. But I do think it's really hard to compare different time periods, different parts of the world, even at the same time, compare different parts of the world. If I'm talking about my favorite, I can't even talk about my favorite time periods, my favorite warrior groups in history, because it changes all the time, right? I loved Vikings, and then I spent a year researching and writing a book on Vikings, and I was done. I didn't want to read about them anymore for a while. I needed to take a break from that, but now I can come back to it, and it's awesome again. I always love the Gurkhas. I love the Gurkhas as like a warrior culture. I think it's fucking amazing. The Gurkhas from Nepal. There's no end to like amazing stories about Gurkhas doing bonkers, like insane shit. One of my favorite stories about that is there was a time during, I want to say, the Falklands, where the British were going to do a parachute drop with the Gurkhas. They were going to parachute in. The British officer was talking to the Gurkha sergeant, and he was like, okay, well, we're going to deploy from 1,000 feet. And the Gurkha was like, no, we need to be closer than that. We need to be at least 300 feet. And the British officer was like, at 300 feet, the parachute isn't going to have time to open. And the Gurkha was like, oh, we'll have parachutes. Okay, yeah, 1,000 feet's fine then. And I love that. Anyway, comparing those, so I'll say the Gurkhas right now are really awesome. I would love to write a book about the samurai. There are so many awesome samurai stories out there, and it's another thing like the Vikings where there's not a lot of stuff out there on them in English that isn't written by somebody who already knows fucking everything about it and like assumes that you know like everything about it already. I would love to just hear like a regular plain English book about the samurai. So yeah, I'll go samurais and Gurkhas. Let's do that. That'll be my answer to your question. Chris says top 5 badasses of all time. Who are my favorites? It's hard. It's hard for me to pick. Right when I was trying to come up with a table of contents for the first badass book, it was like even cutting it down to 40 was like trying to decide which fingers I was going to cut off. Like I pissed off the Yakuza and I needed to like give him a pinky or something. Like it was hard. It was like trying to decide which of my children I was going to sacrifice. And it's so hard. I go back and forth. There's so many that I love. My favorites are always those Wolf the Quarrelsome kind of guys that I was talking about earlier that are just really obscure. There's that Julie Zaubrini, or however the hell you pronounce her name. I'm really bad with the French shit. I was the fucking vice president of my French club in high school for 2 years, but I cannot pronounce French words to save my life. I was in Paris one time, and I was at the front desk, and I went to the lady and was like, "Oh, I'm in Paris. I've never been here before. I want to get a crepe, right? I want to see. I need to get a crepe in Paris. It seems like something I should be doing." And the lady behind the counter, the concierge, she speaks perfect, fluent, non-accented English. And everything, she's using SAT vocabulary on me. And I'm like, "Oh, where do I get crepes?" And she's like, "Huh?" And I was like, "Crepe, where do I get a crepe?" And she's like, "Huh?" All of a sudden, she doesn't speak English. Like, "Oh, what? I don't know what you're talking about." And I was like, "Crepe, this is crepe. It's your word. Well, how do I get a crepe?" And then my friend that was with me, she was like, "Clep." And the lady's like, "Oh, clep." And I was like, "Yeah, how bad it's got to be my pronunciation. I can't do the French words. I can't pronounce them. I write this stuff. I can't say it out loud. Sorry." Anyway, there was a French woman who was a duelist, and she is one of these other cool stories that she doesn't really contribute a ton to the course of human history, but she killed a shitload of people in sword fights in like 1700s in Paris, and it's fucking amazing. She broke into like a nunnery and like ended up like eloping with a nun for a while. Like she went to a dance with this girl, and then these French guys didn't like it, so she challenged all 3 of them to duels, and then she left them all bleeding in the street. Like, she's awesome. The last name is D''Aubringy, something along those lines. If you go to my website, you can check it out. Super amazing, super awesome story. I love that kind of shit. These people who just like, they don't give a fuck and then kick everybody's ass, and they're super obscure. You've never heard about them before, but they have these amazing, adventurous, wonderful, like exciting lives. I love that kind of stuff. Anyway, we'll keep going. And Matt says, when and or how did you discover writing that on these subjects? Well, I botched that. When and how did you discover writing on these subjects were what you wanted to do long term? It just kind of happened. It just kind of came to be for me. I was doing it for fun, and that's like kind of my advice to anybody out there who wants to become a writer or anything. It's like, just, you can't guarantee success, you can't guarantee fame, you can't guarantee book deals or 1,000 hits on your website or whatever. Just write something that you think is awesome and that you're happy with and that you're gonna love. And at the end of the day, you got this thing that you made, and that was kind of what I was doing with Badass. I was like, I don't know, I'm not writing this for anybody, I'm just writing it for me. Because if you try to write for other people or try to predict what people are gonna like, they know. People are good. People aren't as dumb as you like to think that they are, like as people like to think they are. People know when you're bullshitting them. People are good at that, and just, so fuck it. Just write what you want to write, and if you're doing the thing that you want to do, and you're just out there doing it, and you don't give a shit, like you're writing it for you, and it's something you're going to be proud of and happy with, then I think people are going to respond to that. And that's kind of what happened with me. I just wrote this website for myself because I was bored, and then the next thing I know, like, it was blowing up, and it was awesome, and I'm getting book deals, and all of this crazy stuff is happening. I'm getting to do Comic Cons. I get to sit at I'm being asked to host panels at Comic Cons. Like, it's insane, right? And I don't know. It just kind of happened. I kept being presented with really cool opportunities, and I just kept going for them. Let's see what's next. A couple of my friends harassing me. A couple more of my friends harassing me. Okay, Cody says, what kind of music do you enjoy? Let's see, how am I doing on time here? It is 50 minutes. I got 10 minutes left. I will answer these last 4 questions, and then I'm going to call it a night. Okay, what kind of music do I enjoy? And there's another question down here. What songs would be on the soundtrack of your life? They could be badass or not. It's totally up to you. Also, how's your day going, man? Oh, my day is going pretty good, actually. I'm pretty happy. I slept until like 10, made some coffee, cleaned up my house, and now I'm doing this and drinking a beer. And there's worse ways to spend a Sunday, right? Talking about cool history shit and drinking a beer. I'm happy. Life is good. Life is amazing. I'm going off the rails again. Okay. I need to focus. And what was the question? Right. Music. What kind of music do I like? So I do I'm in this trivia. I've got like my friends that we do pub trivia, like pub quiz kind of stuff on Thursday nights. And if the music round involves anything that was popular, like any kind of 1990s alt rock, I'm usually on board with it. Like I think I got Better Than Ezra the other day. Like I get all the weird like 90s alt rock stuff because that was my time period, right? I was in high school from 94 to 98. A lot of shit came out then that was pretty good that I still will listen to. I was really into like shitty punk rock bands, like those like Skater Kid asshole like punk bands, you know, like I loved Bad Religion. I was really into NoFX, Pennywise, that kind of stuff. I have tickets to go see. I paid the extra like $100 for like backstage passes to Screeching Weasel at the end of next month. So I'm like unreasonably excited for this. I like a lot of, I can get on board with the modern day like hipster rock kind of stuff. I can listen to like I like Black Keys and I like Royal Blood is a cool band that I really enjoy. Listen to the the Heavy or Cage the Elephant, that kind of stuff. I was in a band I played drums for 8 years, and we did a bunch of classic rock cover songs. So I'm always, of course, down for Sabbath or Zeppelin or AC/DC, that kind of stuff. I have a pretty decent I was gonna say MP3 collection of that stuff, but I just do it all on it's all on Spotify or Google Play Music now or whatever. When I'm writing, I always start with this song called "Warriors of Time," which it's not a great song, but I love it. I know it's bad, but I like it. Like, I like shitty music, and I just can't, there's nothing I can do about that. So I love this song, Warriors of Time. There's it's history stuff. There's this kind of instrumental lead in that kind of helps me clear my mind and get pumped up for it. So I have a writing playlist that I play when I'm writing badass stuff. And there's some Dragon Force on there, some Death Clock, and I start with that song. And then I also like to listen to a lot of instrumental stuff when I'm writing because I have this weird thing where I sometimes get in this habit of typing the words to the song that I'm listening to. I have a hard time when I do book signings. I can't talk to people while I'm doing the book signing because if I'm trying to write, Live for Revenge and signing my name or whatever in a book, I start writing down the words that I'm saying out loud instead of the words that I'm trying to write. I can't write and talk at the same time. I don't know what the fuck my problem is, but this is a thing with me. And so a lot of times with music that has lyrics, I start typing the lyrics instead of what I want to write. And what the fuck? What is wrong with me? That's not normal. But anyway, so I do a lot of instrumental music. I listen to a lot of there's a couple guys online who do heavy metal versions of video game music. I put that shit on. I'll put on soundtracks to Borderlands 2 has a pretty solid soundtrack that I'll listen to. I'll listen to some Trent Reznor kind of stuff, some ambient kind of things. There's a guy called Nervous Test Pilot that I really like his music. And just kind of have this playlist going on in the background. A lot of I'm all over the map. I have a lot of music that I like. And I have my Camaro playlist. I drive that. I was telling you, I think I might have mentioned earlier that I drive an IROC Camaro. So of course I have to have my Camaro playlist. So it's all shitty 80s hair metal. It's a lot of Warrant and Poison, Megadeth, Guns N' Roses is on there. I've got who I love is Maiden. I love Iron Maiden. They do a lot of really awesome history stuff. I've been wanting to write about Bruce Dickinson for fucking ever on the website, and I definitely need to make that happen at some point. Yeah, I love Maiden. That's usually my go-to, one of my go-to karaoke things is Maiden, because you get to sing about cool history stuff, and he always wears the red coat, which I dig. Yeah. I'm all over the place with that, just like I am with everything else involved with this entire production today. What else do we got? Who would win a fist fight, Sandor Clegane or Roy Benavidez? I can't compare them because I feel like it would be disrespectful to Roy Benavidez to say that. I think Roy Benavidez is one of the most insane, amazing characters I've ever written about on the history of my website. He has a chapter in the third badass book, Ultimate Deathmatch. He was a Vietnam War Green Beret, Medal of Honor. Had been in like such a fucked up battle that they thought he was dead, and like he had to like give a thumbs up as they were zipping him into the body bag was when they realized that he had somehow miraculously survived all the shit that he had gone through. Benavidez, Benavidez. I'm not 100% confident I'm pronouncing it correctly, but definitely a guy that you want to look up. And I also do love me some Sandor Clegane. The only subreddit that I subscribe to is Clegane Bowl. I'm so down with all of that shit. I have like a fucking confirmed, foam finger hanging up in my living room. I'm a very big fan of the Hound. I can't even describe it. Okay, what else do we got? Are jaguars on the list? Any mammal that hunts alligators has to be pretty badass. Also, closed captions would help you reach a wider audience. Would you be adding them to your podcast? I should do that. I cross-post the podcast onto YouTube, and I don't know if there's an easy way to add the closed captioning. I will look it up when I upload this. Jaguars, yes, for sure. I love that shit where... I love the... I think it's leopards, the ones in Africa where they dive bomb out of the tops of trees. Jaguar is cool because the jaguar is the only big cat that kills by biting the skull. It bites the brain and not the neck. A lot of the big cats go for the jugular, and then jaguar goes for the brain, which I think is fucking awesome. I want to write about that. I want to write about leopards because you see all those awesome videos of them just like dive bombing out of the top of a fucking tree into like a herd of animals, and it's amazing. It's like this aerial acrobatics, like Tony Hawk fucking with teeth. It's amazing. Yes, all that stuff's going on there. Right now, I think the only big cat I have is a saber-toothed tiger, but that should be rectified at some point. Jay says, who would win, 1,000 Marines or one sun? I love it's that old meme of like, who would win, 1,000 Marines or a stick? And they're like, oh, of course the Marines. And it's like, no, Marine steps on stick. Now you have two stick. Stick win every time. I think it would be very difficult to blow up the sun. 1,000 Marines probably would not survive a fist fight against the sun. Just going to go out there and say that. It's a hot take at badassoftheweek.com. Okay, that is all the questions I received. I'm at 58 minutes and some kind of change. It will probably be edited down slightly less than that because I've been rambling like a fucking maniac. So I'm going to call it there. If you have questions that you would like to hear me answer at future episodes or anything else that you want me to talk about on here, if you liked this, any of that kind of stuff, post it onto the Facebook page or the Patreon, or you can comment it on the YouTube channel. Everything's youtube.com/badasshistory, facebook.com/badasshistory, patreon.com/badasshistory. Badass of the Week was taken by all of these things before I was able to register them, so I go with Badass History instead. And yeah, if you have other questions and stuff, maybe I'll do one of these again in the future. And I guess that's gonna be it. So thanks for listening. Thanks for making it all the way to the end. I appreciate it. And as always, thanks for everything. Cool. Bye, I guess.